Hello, this is the Freethought Forum. It's a program brought by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalist of East Tennessee. I'm Joe Barnhart.
And I am Mary Ann Barnhart. And we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you are not alone. Here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and people interested in living a life free of supernatural beliefs. Today's topic is the problem of evil, suffering, and the Satan theory.
The Satan's theory. We're going to get into that. Okay, this is a call-in show, and we have a few announcements, but get your pen and paper ready so you may want to interact with us on the program. It would be a welcome. We would invite that. We'll give you our email also on the screen. The Atheist Society of Knoxville has a fun meeting, Mary Ann. They gave us an announcement about that.
Oh, yes. It's often at a bar or eatery, sometimes even doing karaoke. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's for happy hour after this show for food, drink, and conversation. Friday evening, weather permitting, we meet at the Bearden Beer Market. If the weather becomes inclement, an alternate location will be Agave Azul's, which is just across Kingston Pike from the beer market. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to visit our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
Okay. Now, there's the Rationalists of East Tennessee who have discussions, they have presentations. They meet on the first and third Sundays of the month around 11 o'clock. They have a fellowship time before that, and you'd be welcome to come to meet some of the people. And it's a very lively discussion I think you would enjoy. And also they have a Sunday book club, and the fourth Sunday is the Reflections gathering time and potluck afternoons and members' homes also. And then, Marianne, we have something on the November the 20th, I think.
Yes, that will be a discussion of the first five books of the Old Testament, the Torah, describing the epic history of the Israelites. These books constitute much of the foundation on which Judaism and Christianity are based, but they are a mixture of fact, legend, and mythology, which are not easily distinguishable for the average reader.
Yeah, that will be an exceedingly interesting program. And where did the first five books come from? Rationalist of East Tennessee member Ralph Eisler will address that. And we'll deal with the question of was there really an exodus? And was there a military conquest of Canaan? It's a historical question. And then also on the month's reflection afternoon, they get together in a season. And how do non-believers celebrate holy days, Marianne?
What is a free thinker to do as we enter the holiday season? What is the range of reactions to the numerous religious holidays recognized by our federal government? Exactly what, when, how, and why do they celebrate? Mm-hmm. Most of us are former Christians and are familiar with Christian holidays and traditions, many of which have almost totally commercialized versions of their original purposes. Do most non-believers just go along to get along and passively accept these religious remnants? How do we spend this work-free time? Have we created traditions for our own families, or do we take the time to travel abroad or visit relatives?
Yeah, most of those holidays have been borrowed down the centuries and redefined. All cultures redefined holidays. And so you can visit the website and of the rationalists of East Tennessee. And now in the news, the meteors are coming in November, around the 17th of this month. The 17th of this month. So the shower will come. It's named after the Greek the word for lion, Leo, and so look for Leo in the sky.
Yes, this year's shower peaks on the night of the 17th and early hours of the 18th. But the moon will interfere with the early morning hours. The shower will start a day or so before and end a day later, but the peak will likely have much higher rate. Watching for meteors requires no special optical equipment, but you will need a reclining chair or an air mattress on the ground and a blanket to stay warm as you comfortably look up.
And to really enjoy it, take friends with you and have good conversation while you watch the stars and watch the meteor display. It will be like firework rockets in the sky, and light up the ground somewhat, and streaks of light high in the sky. It will be an enjoyable time. Well, Marianne, about Neil. What about Neil Tyson?
He says if we're scientifically literate, the world looks very different to us. We know these storms are the result of natural actions in the natural world, including the motion of the earth and comets around the sun.
Yeah, Tyson gives us a kind of a poetic description, which I'm going to read you. The very molecules making up your body, the atoms constructing the molecules, are traceable to the crucibles that were once the center of high-mass stars that exploded their chemically rich guts into the galaxy, enriching pristine gas clouds with the chemistry of life, so that we are connected. Now that's his point. We are connected to each other biologically, to the chemistry of life, and to the rest of the universe anatomically. That's a big connection.
Not long ago, when superstition ruled far and wide, a meteor storm could fuel fear of the end of the world, and opportunists took advantage of people. Joseph Smith, founder of Mormonism, declared one Leonid shower to be evidence that the coming of Christ was close at hand.
Yeah, I remember as a boy reading a book about that, an entire book with pictures, and how terribly frightened some people were because they truly thought that was the end of the world. We would like to point out that even the prediction of meteor showers is not an exact science. Nevertheless, it's apparently more accurate than prediction of the second coming, which has been predicted how many times? Nobody really knows for sure. So anyhow, the forecast for Thursday night and Friday morning, Marianne, looks pretty good, don't you think?
Yes, that's what we hear.
Okay. So hope we get some. So returning now to today's topic, the problem of evil, of suffering, and the Satan theory.
We're taking calls now at the number on the screen. There is about a 7-second delay in the broadcast, so once you call, please mute your television and listen to us over the phone, or we will all be confused.
Okay. Now the program then is trying to deal with this terrible problem of human suffering and natural catastrophe, and then also the unfortunate problem of downright human evil. Why is our species so capable of human evil? We're going to get into this. I want Marianne, if you will, let me read a passage from Bertrand Russell on this, because this issue does raise so many problems philosophically and practical problems. But I'll summarize what Russell is trying to say. Bertrand Russell was a philosopher who lived to be in his 90s. He said, if you're going to have a democracy, this is in his essays, it's important to try to understand other people's point of view, which is very, very difficult. That's why in the universities they call it a discipline. It takes an enormous amount of discipline to get inside another point of view and to realize that we are all humans, and so humans have these viewpoints, and they mean something to those people. But Russell is right. Each culture tends to think the other culture is ridiculous, if not downright evil. And so what we're trying to do here is to get inside systems. Now, the best way to criticize any system, including our own, is not to say it is not like mine, but get inside it and see if it's consistent. So let's try to do that. And this problem of evil has been dealt with by the Greeks in their great tragedies. And in the Old Testament, remember the famous drama is, remember the book of Job. This is a book that wrestled with the problem of why good people suffer. And that's the book of Job. So what is that problem of evil, Marianne?
If you're suffering from arthritis, we have an idea of what it is. The people in Missouri or in Georgia and Alabama who lost their homes and in some cases their loved ones in the tornadoes know personally what it is.
Yeah, I remember I had just turned 18 when I learned my mother was dying of cancer. She was at the age of 42, and she had four children, 3 of them younger than I. But that's what we mean by the problem of evil or suffering or tragedy. And all cultures have had to deal with this. If we go to the dentist with a toothache,
well, he'll try to find the cause of our pain so he or she can fix the problem and give us relief. But recently we learned of a family that lost a child. You don't fix that. We might try to discover the cause of the child's death so that another child won't die of the same disease or cause.
Yeah, but why evil at all? Why crime? Why so much human evil? Why is that?
Some cultures have notions of evil spirits, demons, or even Satan as head of all organized crime.
And disorganized crime. So people who believe in Satan, at least most that I know, also believe in capital punishment. So why does a good, powerful God on this theory keep this Satan alive? What's the whole point if you believe in capital punishment?
Well, apparently to infest the world with more evil, disease, and death, which doesn't say much for the moral character of this notion of God, does it? But I know what you're getting at. You're wondering, if there were a God in full control, why would he give a Satan character a free pass to travel throughout the galaxy to proliferate, rape, plunder, devastation, and murder?
Yeah. So why keep, if there is a Satan at all, why keep him alive? If you believe in capital punishment, or if you believe in incarcerating the head mobster of all. And this is according to the traditional view, the Satan figure, that we're going to deal with that, and there are many important books on this. Here you admittedly, on this theory, have the mass organizer of crime instigating atrocities throughout the world, all evil on earth. So yes, I am wondering, and I'm asking Marianne what's the holdup with this Satan figure? Why waiting? Why are we waiting on this?
Some Christians and Jews I know have concluded the whole Satan theory explains nothing, and in fact creates more problems than it presumably answers. What's your opinion?
Well, it does create problems. And I think the author of Job in the Bible knew that it created problems. And in fact, in the book of Job, Satan is in many ways a mistranslation. It should be just translated the adversary, because he plays the role of the prosecuting attorney, and he makes a bet with God in this story. It's a drama.
Wait a minute. Christians and believing Jews wouldn't really believe that God could make a bet.
Well,
don't theologians say that God already knows the outcome to every detail, nothing slipping through the cracks?
Well, that's the Orthodox theology. And I think the author of the book of Job was not so much a theologian as a man who knew how to write a drama, and he was suffering the problem and is trying to deal with it. And he raises all kinds of issues. But it's a way of challenging the Hebrew tradition that if a person is righteous and lives a good life, he will prosper or she will prosper. Enemies will not conquer them, and the rain and sunshine will fall for their cattle and their crops.
But Job's children are destroyed in a tornado, in what insurance companies call an act of God.
Yeah, there's no Satan there, is there? And that's what's beautiful about the book of Job. He doesn't cheat. He doesn't pass the buck off to a Satan character. He is in effect saying, in fact, Job wants to address God, saying, this is your responsibility. You're in charge of the weather, the storms, the pestilence. Why are good people suffering so much? And he was wiped out.
So the writer of this powerful drama in the Bible doesn't pass the buck to a Satan character after all.
That's right. God does his own dirty work, to put it bluntly. He doesn't hire a henchman, doesn't hire a cosmic figure to pull the trigger. The writer of Job doesn't play a coward to stand behind a Satan figure. The writer won't let God say, don't blame me, blame Satan. He won't let that happen.
Why is that?
Well, because God was supposed to be in charge. He was the writer portrays him as something like the CEO of the universe. And the buck is supposed to stop with the head CEO of the universe.
So if this God made the mistake of hiring Satan in the first place, he should have what? Fired him as soon as it was clear he was beginning to gum up the works?
Well, yeah. Either God's in charge or he's not. That's one of the questions that seems to me to come out of the book of Job, right there in the Bible. Now, in the New Testament, you have disciples and other individuals fencing around with demons. But the state of California, when they found a terribly wicked character named Charles Manson, they didn't try to exorcise the demons. They didn't fool around with that. They incarcerated him after convicting him in court. No parole. So we're asking, Marianne, the question is, why would you parole someone like Satan, of all things, to run across the entire galaxy to do nothing but harm? And then you have in the New Testament, in some way, something like this, the book of Revelation. You have a God saying, just give me time, I'll catch up with you, Satan, and then I'll put you in prison and throw away the key. Just give me time.
Well, doesn't the author of the second epistle of Peter in the New Testament raise that very question?
Yeah.
What's the holdup? Where's the justice?
Well, yeah, 2 Peter is written late in the first century, at least late. Maybe we don't know exactly who wrote it. But he's raising the question, in effect, what's the holdup? Where's the second coming, which is supposed to clean out all the mess in the world and restore a perfect society? Where is it? And all the fellow could come up with is a day with the Lord is as 1,000 years.
Not very comforting to someone sitting in a Roman prison or to someone suffering from a horrible disease. 1 hour of pain might seem like a year, but thinking that there's a God living his life on a different time schedule really doesn't deal with the issue, does it?
No, it doesn't, Marianne. In fact, the Old Testament and the New Testament constantly are wrestling with this problem of suffering and evil. You have and how does God figure in this God character figure in with all this evil if he is in control? And in 2 Samuel 24, you have a strange story. Even an evangelical writer says it's a strange story in which God tempts David to do something evil, and then he gives David some choices as to what the punishment would be. And the punishment turns out to be to annihilate 70,000 of his fellow Israelites.
How's that for moral relativism?
Well, that's the Bible for you. The Bible doesn't have just one set of ethics. In many ways, despite what preachers say about the Bible being a foundation of ethics, it doesn't work that way. The Bible is more like Fibber McGee's closet. You never know what's in it until you open the door to see what falls out.
Sounds like the closet of our old pal John Calvin.
Yeah, exactly. He did not, this is John Calvin, he didn't shy away from saying point blank, God causes suffering. He wanted a God really in charge. And even for him, Satan was a lackey working for God.
Calvin's God seems eager to punish wholesale.
Wholesale punishment is right. As a matter of fact, he lumps all human beings together, this is Calvin, as being evil upon birth. And therefore, all people deserving of punishment. There's a passage from a Calvinist like Edward John Carnell, who was a professor and president of Fuller Seminary. Fuller Seminary in California. Wrote Introduction to Christian Apologetics, and there's a quote, Marianne. Can you read the quote from his book? This gives us an insight as to how a Calvinist deals with the problem of evil.
In perfect goodness and justice, not only can God send some men to hell, but he can send them all. That's truly morbid, don't you think?
Morbid? It's perverse. It's I don't know of any other word except perverse and malevolent. Carnell's teacher, Gordon Clark, went so far as to say, whatever God does is good. Why? Just because he does it.
No matter what it is?
No matter what. Apparently God, according to Clark, is outside the law. In fact, he uses the phrase ex lex, outside the law. He's an outlaw in that respect.
Gordon Clark, wasn't that Billy Graham's teacher at Wheaton College?
Yeah, it was Billy Graham's teacher. In fact, in Gordon Clark's book, Religion, Reason, and Revelation, I can give you a quote. Here's a direct quote from Gordon Clark, the Calvinist. I wish very frankly and pointedly to say, if a man gets drunk and shoots his family, it was the will of God that he should do so. And then on page 22, the next page of that same book, he says, it may seem strange at first to say that God would decree an immoral act. And it does seem strange that God would decree not foresee, but decree, bring it about before he foresees it. He writes the script for it. That's what he's saying. It's strange that first that God would decree an immoral act, but, says Clark, the Bible shows that he did, end quote.
Doesn't the Bible say God put a lying spirit into the mouth of a false prophet?
False prophet? Yeah, that's biblical. That's one of the passages that Gordon Clark refers to, as a matter of fact. And if Satan causes evil, then is he God's agent? And that's what the Calvinists and many Christians hold, that Satan is an agent of God. He's merely God's tool. That's the Apostle Paul's view, by the way.
Doesn't the Apostle Paul's view in Romans chapter 9 portray the ruthless Pharaoh of Egypt as God's tool, nurturing Pharaoh for the very purpose of exhibiting God's power and spreading his fame throughout the earth?
Yeah. Pharaoh is also God's tool. And in fact, in that same chapter of chapter 9 of Romans, you have the story of two children in the womb. Have we got a phone call? Yeah, let's try the phone call. Yes, go ahead, please. Can we get the message from our call-in?
Oh, yeah, I just now heard you.
Go ahead, go.
Yeah, I was wanting to talk about Satan here and God and evil and all that. And as I'm listening to you, I just start having the idea that these Satanists may have the right idea. In that they're worshiping Satan.
Where'd you get that idea?
Oh, it just seems like he's the more benign character between God and Satan. I mean, as far as I know, Satan didn't kill anybody, and as far as I know, Satan didn't lie to anybody, unless you have some other evidence. But
well, yeah, go ahead.
I might be tempted to be a Satanist myself if it wasn't that it seems like all Satanists are just zit-faced adolescents trying to irritate their parents.
Well, I don't know that I would agree with that, but you're welcome to try.
Well, what I mean is I cannot. I mean, the God of the Bible, for the life of me, I cannot imagine what a demon would have to do to be any worse of a demon.
Well, okay, I see your point. It's a little like saying Hitler's so bad, I think I'll join up with Mussolini.
Well,
okay.
If Mussolini, no, actually, we have evidence that Mussolini did bad things. I don't know of anything that Satan did that was bad.
Well,
do you?
Well, first of all, I don't think there is a Satan. That's my whole point.
Oh, well, I meant the Satan of the literature of the Bible.
Oh, yeah, well, sure. In the literature of the Bible, of course, Satan is supposed to be the cause of illnesses, earthquakes. In other words, you have passages in which he becomes the agent of God. But you have a really good point, is that the Bible doesn't do that much, make that much a deal out of Satan so much as the preachers and the theologians who were so happy to take this notion and run away with it.
I don't recall Satan causing any illness.
Well,
except for maybe Job, but that was with permission from God. Well,
and then the New Testament has Satan in charge of all these demons.
Oh, I see what I was sort of thinking of the Old Testament more than anything. Yeah, maybe.
Well, you have a really good point. You don't have a lot of a notion of a Satan in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fairly late invention.
Yeah.
And so your point is exceedingly well taken. In the book of Job, it is not a Satan character at all. That's just in the sense of some evil character trying to do harm. That's not in the book of Job.
Well, let me ask you something else. It seems like a lot of people are saying that Satan was in the Garden of Eden,
That's not there. No, that's not in the Hebrew Bible. No.
But it is in the...
That's the theologians putting it in.
In the New Testament.
Well, it's not even that much. It's mostly...
He was that old dragon in the... Scripture saying he was that old dragon, and then that referred to the Garden of Eden.
Well, that's another piece of mythology we could get entangled in that the book of Revelation brings in. But in that story in Genesis, Genesis has no Satan theory.
I see. Well, maybe I should ask you, could you imagine of any greater... I mean, the way I think of it is that, are some people demon worshipers when they go to a church on the corner?
Well, I'm not in... Right now, this program is not about a demon worship group right now. It's about a theory of the devil in the Bible and in theology. And what you're talking about is a subculture group who has this, some of them you said are teenagers trying to revolt against their parents. And that's another topic.
Well, it's really good that y'all are out there at least trying to clear up some of these misconceptions. I swear there's so many of them going around, and I certainly did learn a little bit from what I'm watching on you today. Well,
I want to thank you for helping us to point out that the Hebrew Bible is not filled with the notion of Satan. That's more what's called the interbiblical period, in which you have a lot of what's called dualism developing. We can't get into that, but a kind of a dualistic view of the universe, and Manichaeanism, which developed later, and then Augustine got into that, and that's where he got his theory of Satan from the Manichaeans, I think.
Well, I appreciate it, and let me hang up because there's probably some folks got some questions of their own.
Well, those are some good questions. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, thank you for that insight for us, and we need to. We're on the 9th chapter of Romans, where Paul says that there were 2 kids in the womb of Rebekah, and God hated one of them and loved the other. Now, just ordinary common sense and ordinary decency. That sends a chill up your back. Why would even a Nazi do that? You see, why would a loving God presumably do that? Well, for whatever it's worth, some Calvinists get very excited about this passage because they think it really helps teach Calvinism. And but it does say, I remember I took Greek in college, partly because I wanted to know, is that the Greek word for hatred? And it is. There's no covering it up. He hated little Esau before he was born.
And you think Paul really thought his God literally hated Esau?
Well, that's what he said. He was trying to make an argument. And that's all we can do is take him at his word. It does say it's... I mean, it does seem at least unfair, to say the least. The child didn't even know his name. But, Marion, I think you could say that's power. That's Paul's whole point. He's trying to emphasize God has power. He can even decide to hate a kid and love one and hate the other, even when they're in the womb. And he makes it clear, Paul does, neither of those kids had done anything good or bad. The point is, God makes the decision. Now, my question is, what does that say about God?
Might makes right.
Might makes right. Might makes right. That's what it is. And that's what I think is the lowest on the ladder of morality, is might makes right. Even if it's absolute, right makes right. Okay. Now, and that, of course, would bring us to the book of Revelation. We won't have time to that. But that, in some ways, the book of Revelation spells this out, of might makes right. I mean, it's written by a fella who apparently has really been kicked around. And he doesn't turn the other cheek. He pulls out the other sword. And he is, in effect, a terrorist at a cosmic level. And he doesn't have any power, but he's envisioning power in which his enemies will be not just annihilated. That would be too good for them from his point of view. They will be tormented day and night forever. So maybe Calvin saw the book of... Calvin, by the way, didn't make a commentary on the book of Revelation.
Well, maybe he saw it as a mirror and didn't like the face he saw in the mirror.
Well, that may be, because it is strange that he did not write a commentary on the book of Revelation.
But not all people who believe in a God embrace the Satan theory. What about Plato, for example?
No, Plato didn't have he held a view of God, but he did not have a Satan theory. And in fact, he had a view trying to account for both good and evil in the world. And I think you can see circles on the screen. And imagine you've got, they call them CME circles. C would be the creator for Plato. C is the creator. M stands for the models that the creator uses. And the E is the energy. Now, God didn't create energy for Plato, and he doesn't create the models. This is part of the equipment he has to work with. And he uses the energy to shape according to the ideas or the universals or the models. And the goodness of the world comes about for Plato partly because God is successful as the great architect in shaping and designing the world in harmony.
But what about the suffering and disorder?
Well, then his explanation for that is not the Satan theory, that the energy that he works with is not wholly compliant, and he's less than fully successful in getting it totally in harmony with his ideals and his goals.
So Plato's God isn't all-powerful.
No, he is not all-powerful. He is powerful enough to create a universe, but not powerful enough to control it in every detail so that it's perfect without any suffering or agony.
He simply can't fulfill all his highest intentions for goodness and beauty.
That's right. He lacks power, but he does not hate Esau. I mean, in that sense, oddly enough, you have a strange combination. Calvin's God is all-powerful and really restricted in morality. Plato's God is moral but restricted in power. Things slip for Plato. Things slip through the cracks. And that's why those ancient Greeks, it seemed to me, wrote so many dramas about tragedy. They understood there is real suffering, there's real tragedy in the world, that good people don't always come out on top. And the book of Job is the equivalent to a Greek tragedy. So, let's move on, right? Suffering. According to Bertrand Russell, an outstanding philosopher, we brought some of his books, but he wrote a lot of books. If a man lives to be in his 90s, a mathematician and a philosopher. But in one of his books, he makes it quite clear that suffering is not an illusion. Now, that's part of the Hindu tradition, that in Maya, it's an illusion. But Bertrand Russell says, no, if you've suffered, you don't think it's an illusion. Maybe, I don't know whether you can read the print there, but this is Bertrand Russell. That's about the animal kingdom. Can you read that print?
Throughout the animal kingdom, animals ruthlessly prey upon each other. Most of them are either cruelly killed by other animals or slowly die of hunger.
Yeah.
For my part, I am unable to see any very great beauty or harmony in the tapeworm. Let it not be said that this creature is sent as a punishment for our sins, for it is more prevalent among animals than among humans.
Yeah. In other words, if you're going to try to explain the problem of suffering and evil, You can't just say, well, it's human sin, because you've got an enormous amount of suffering in the animal kingdom, as Bertrand Russell points out. And by the way, Plato probably lived around 347, and that's BC. Mm-hmm. And other Christians or Hebrews after him and Christians after him borrowed some from his theology. I can give an example. The early, Plato's Timaeus, famous work, deals with this problem. And then later, some of the Hebrew writers come along, and they have the notion of God having a companion called Sophia, or wisdom, that helps shape the world. Later, some of the Christians borrow this. Well, that's like borrowing part of what Plato calls the model to shape the world. But the Hebrews had the problem of God being omnipotent. And so why is there so much suffering? Plato recognized God, from his point of view, God would not be omnipotent. He would rather say God is lacking in power rather than saying he's this evil. And Christian theologians like Thomas Aquinas, however, put the models of Plato inside God's head and made it God's mind. But he did away with God's energy because he wanted to say that God created from nothing, ex nihilo. And that only increased the problem of where evil comes from.
And what did he do with Plato's theory of energy?
Well, he simply said God doesn't discover energy, he is energy. And he starts from nothing, he starts from scratch. So why doesn't he produce a better world? In fact, he dropped the notion of energy that Plato had like a hot potato, because he wanted to have God with all power. And so God created the universe out of nothing.
Like magic?
Like magic. Yeah, hocus pocus. There is no world, then hocus pocus, there's a world. Grass already growing. You got Adam and Eve already mature. They didn't have to grow up already. Now the problem is that's Thomas Aquinas' view, he's enormously influential in Catholic theology, also on some Protestant theology. If God had no encumbrances and no impediments to deal with, why would he settle for a second-rate or third-rate world if he could have had a better world? That's the problem that Thomas Aquinas had to deal with, and he didn't deal with it too well. In fact, I guess you're wondering if he came up with a theory of the devil.
Probably brought in Satan again.
Yeah, he did. And he brought in the Satan theory to try to explain evil. And in my opinion, he messed up his whole theology. It just didn't work. Now, you and I know, since animals have arthritis, as Bertrand Russell points out, human beings have arthritis. How can this be explained? Well, we've got to reach a midterm point, and we're going to get with this problem of evil and suffering even more. So let's get to a break. In case you're wanting to know, the Freethought Forum is a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. And they jointly fund the program that we're on. And the show is every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. And you can get it on your computer or your television, you can go to ctvknox.org. I hear there are other calls, but we'll try to move on. Okay, Marianne. Let's move on and talk a little bit about Thomas Aquinas some more. Thomas Aquinas had read the works of Anselm, a theologian in his tradition, who said God was perfect. And in fact, he argues for God as that being than which none greater can be conceived. And Thomas seems to agree with that view of what God is. So the question is, why such an imperfect world? Now, Thomas envisioned a heaven in which there would not be rheumatism or arthritis. There would be no evil, no murder, no lying, nothing evil. But why could he not start that way? And if he can get that, how does he do that? You see, why does he? It's almost as if he has a God who is an experimenter, and he experiments with the universe, and then he says, well, this won't work, that won't work, and then he puts it aside and starts over again, and that's called heaven. And of course, we don't have any way to verify anything about that. As a matter of fact, Thomas didn't quite pull it off as perfect, because he did say, along with heaven would be the eternal prison. So it is not a world of all's well that ends well. It's, in fact, the caller we just had saw the point. The theology of Orthodox Christianity has a pretty miserable view of the universe. That a few people go to have a good life, whereas the masses go for unending suffering. And how you say, praise God from whom all blessings flow, with that. That's, well, many Christians, I think, simply push that back into the closet and just don't deal with it. Now, let's move to another view of theism that was influenced by Plato. And that's a view of E.S. Brightman. Remember we were working on Brightman years ago?
Oh, yes.
So Brightman, if we could get on our screen, held to the notion there's God who has rational given, the non-rational given, and his will. Those three circles there. Non-rational given, rational given, and will. And if we could try to explain that. The W says God has will, the will to value. And the other circle represents the rational given. It means God is rational. It's given in the sense God didn't create himself that way. That's the way he is. But that broken line around says God has non-rational energy. That is to say, the energy that Plato talked about is a part of God's own life. And that's what he has to deal with in creating the world. In other words, now where is the universe, by the way, on Brightman's view? And the universe of nature is actually a part of God. It's God's body. Now, from Christian point of view, who is incarnate? Remember, one person is God incarnate. Jesus, yeah. Jesus is God incarnate. But for Brightman, he is arguing something like Einstein. And this gets to be very technical, but let's see, this is how they're trying to keep their theism and deal with the problem of evil. And so Brightman says the universe is God embodied. And in other words, God is not an abstract spirit independent of a material world. The universe is God incarnate.
And he is energized.
And he is energized, exactly. And this energy then is the energy of the universe, and out of this evolves. Now Brightman is an evolutionist. Out of it evolves all forms of life, including you and me, anywhere from the amoeba to Einstein. This is part of what evolves out of nature, out of God's body. This is somewhat close to Einstein's view, in my opinion. Einstein tended to use the word nature and God interchangeably. Both Brightman and Einstein are not, put it this way, neither one of them is a supernaturalist. You see what I mean? They don't, in other words, that's why science is so important to Brightman. Because from Brightman's point of view, you want to know what God's doing, study science. Talk to farmers. Talk to people talk to plumbers. Talk to electricians. People who have to live in the real world of space and time. That's the language of God. So mathematics is part of God's order, you see, from Brightman's point of view. Now, the suffering of the world is because God's non-rational given is not totally harmonized. There is imperfection. In other words, God too suffers pain. Now Einstein, if I can get a quote from Einstein, I thought I brought a book. Oh, here it is. Einstein had a view, if you can find this, right there. Einstein cabled to a rabbi, and here's Einstein's view.
Einstein cabled back, I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the harmony of all being, not in a God who concerns himself with the fate and actions of men.
Yeah, now that's a different view from what's traditional theology. Now the real question is not whether there's a God or it's not so much you die over a word. Find out what people mean by their words. And it seems to me that Einstein uses the word he's like Spinoza, uses the word God and nature interchangeably. And the word God is nature looked at in a certain way. Okay? And both Brightman and Einstein are saying this God does not send you text messages. It doesn't send prophets these divine revelations, because all of nature is revelation. But you have to study it. You have to interact with it. And there's where science comes in. And that's why they're evolutionists, you see, is they realize evolution is part of the development of this world of nature and our place in it. So, you might ask, where is God? Well, it's like asking, where is the universe? You see? In other words, where is in the universe, not out of the universe. So that's what is meant by incarnation in Brightman's view. So God is not a disembodied spirit. Now, some people don't want to use the word God that way, and that's okay. I'm not interested in a word. I'm just in understanding what people's ideas are, whatever words they attach to them. They're saying this is a universe that's got order and structure and energy, but it doesn't always work according to our humane, moral standards. And that's why we often have tragedy, devastation, earthquake, In other words, the world is simply there. Now, Brightman's view and John Dewey's view are very similar. Now, Dewey does not believe. Dewey is a naturalist. And you remember who John Dewey is, the American pragmatist.
Mm-hmm.
Very famous philosopher, an important philosopher in America. The naturalist says the universe is not conscious. The universe has consciousness. You and I are part of the universe, and we're a conscious part of it. There are all kinds of pockets of consciousness. Brightman believes the whole universe has an overall consciousness. He calls God. John Dewey does not believe the universe has an overall consciousness. He's a naturalist, and therefore he does not have a God. But what's interesting to me is the morality and the ethical theory of both Brightman and John Dewey are very, very similar. And their social theories are very similar. And they both were members of the American Philosophical Society in the East. Both had enormous influence. The universe is not conscious, and I think what I think Einstein is saying is the universe or God is not giving consideration to our concerns. There's simply the universe developing, and you and I are in it. So there is no cosmic Satan, and for the naturalist, there is no cosmic consciousness or God. And what about natural evil? It's part of the natural evil is simply there are catastrophes and horrors that happen, and they are not planned by anybody. There are, on the other hand, some evils that are planned by human beings, and those are the moral evils. And we of course could talk about why people are that way. We could do that too. But there's a quote from John Dewey that I left somewhere on this, and you did too, Mary. And you remember what page they put it on? Here it is, A Common Faith. And this is John Dewey, the naturalist, who says the universe is not conscious, but you and I are. We who now live are a part of a humanity that extends into the remote past, a humanity that has interacted with nature. The things in civilization we prize most are not of ourselves. They exist by the grace of the doings and sufferings of the continuous human community in which we are a link. And there's one other little quote. Let me get you to read it, Mary Ann, if you would, from John Dewey, the naturalist.
Ours is the responsibility of conserving, transmitting, rectifying, and expanding the heritage of values we have received, so that those who come after us may receive it more solid and secure, more widely accessible, and more generously shared than we have received it.
Okay. Now, I don't know how much time we have left. Does anybody know? We don't have time to go into human evil. That's a whole new ball game. Rousseau said we were all born like noble savages, and society corrupts us. But that's too simple.